Hey, what's up guys, it's ElasticSpyder here, and in today's video we're looking at not community replay, but a player/match analysis. Unfortunately, I was not able to record some of your guys' awesome replays, and we had a lot this time due to some IRL issues that I had to deal with, so I was not able to get a recording done. I do apologize for that. I will show some honorable mentions at the end of the video. But today we're going to be looking at TheSneakySnake's perspective, and he wanted me to kind of analyze this match and do what I analyze what he was doing. So he is in the tier 10 Russian destroyer, the Grozovoy. Now, as some of you may know, or you should know, the Russian DDs split at tier 8. They split between the Kiev and the Ognivoy. And depending on what line you go with, you get a slightly different build with each of them. One line you have the tier 10 Khabarovsk, which is a very good gunboat and very good flanker and flank pusher as well. So that is something you get with that line, as well as some survivability aspects that are pretty nice and some insane speed. On the other line, though, you do get the tier 10 Russian destroyer, the Grozovoy. I believe these are considered more destroyer leaders, so they have slightly different characteristics in terms of their guns and their capabilities for what they can take. So, for example, the Khabarovsk line, the more cruiser-like ships have something like a heal, and they can also equip smoke as well, just to compensate for other things like port torpedoes. Whereas the Grozovoy is more of a smoking, and it's more of a it's like a destroyer escort, ship escort, fleet escort, if you will. So that's what we're dealing with the Grozovoy. Now, normally this is a good push onto the westernmost flank of this map, Northern Lights. The reason being is there's a lot of open space, so there's a lot of room for battleships and even heavy cruisers to be wandering about. But the thing is, the Grozovoy is still a gunboat at the end of the day, so it can do things like this and just kite away at about 10-ish kilometers, and it's going to be very, very hard for anyone to hit you. So that's what TheSneakySnake's doing here, and meanwhile he is just dodging some shells. The good thing about the Grozovoy is, since it doesn't get completely terrible torpedoes, it's got, I think, a 10-kilometer torpedoes at max in max configuration. So you are somewhat capable of using your torps and using them somewhat effectively as kind of dual-purpose torps, like we see here with TheSneakySnake. He shot his torps off on one target, and unfortunately they just end there, and then he works on another target, simultaneously burning them down. So a good start and distributing the damage and the focus to various ships at various times, something that you should always be doing. Another good point I want to mention: he preemptive smoked. Sometimes this is good, sometimes this is bad. In this occasion, we didn't know what was coming at us, since we don't have a CV that can do some early spotting for us here on the western flank. So having a preventative smoke to cover our advance is actually a very good tactic in this situation. So again, good play by him. And after he was done kiting, he has moved back into position, either to smoke us or to spot some destroyers and just help for overall scouting of things like torpedoes. So Yamato's moving somewhat slow, and TheSneakySnake decides to smoke up. Of course, when you see torps, you want to most of the time you want to turn in, but again, nice job turning out and kind of smoking the fleet. One thing I do want to mention here is the way that he smoked. He didn't smoke directly at the enemy, he smoked basically across the enemy, across their line of sight. So he gets as much smoke coverage as physically possible for the somewhat short duration smoke, I believe at only like 20-ish seconds. But he ends up killing the Gearing, who was silly enough to start shooting in smoke. This was, of course, before smoke detection changed with the most recent patch, so it was very fortunate. The Des Moines Mega Dude, you can see there, has his radar active, so that's what killed the Gearing. So, good smoke deployment. The thing about the Grozavoy is that it is not necessarily the best ship to go out and spot with. It can get some somewhat stealthy concealment if you do spec into it. I believe it's at 6 kilometers, but then you also have to deal with things like Z-52s, Gearings, and Shimikazes that all, one, outspot you, and as well as they outgun you for the most part. Very nice use of AP here. Switching to AP here was actually very critical because you were able to get citadels at near 4.5 kilometers, like you saw there, and that actually got his health down very, very quickly, and only allowed that Atago to launch one set of torpedoes, which again is a very, very good thing to happen. You want to kill targets as fast as possible so they don't have any time to react and counteract your aggression. So we just get to see some nice kiting action, somewhat kiting action here. Another thing I want to mention is the way the way you put the smoke down to is he put it in a sort of a U shape or an L shape. This allowed, if you look on the minimap, Mega Dude in the Des Moines was facing southwest. Now he is facing northeast, so he's been able to do a complete U-turn with the help of his smoke. So another good point to hammer home there is you don't want to just only be smoking diagonally across the fleet, but also wrap it around a little bit so things like cruisers or battleships that have slightly worse turning circles can get out relatively safely. So we see here on the Yamato we've already got a fire or two, so we are going to switch to AP, and this AP works on these Russian destroyers from about like 60-ish degrees, so like right about there. Yeah, it works anywhere from 60-ish to 40-ish degrees, depending on how you're angled, but for the most part it is very effective. Of course, when those fires run out, you have to switch back to HE, because that's when targets are most likely to start angling, which you see here. I talked again. I mentioned earlier about the dual-purpose torpedoes, and you saw there they were intended for the Yamato, but he ended up speeding up and was out of range of those torpedoes. But we ended up hitting the Shimikaze, which again is very, very nice. And for only 10 kilometers torpedoes, they are rather stealthy. I believe they are at, I think, 1.9 kilometer detectability. But in any case, they are quite effective for what they do. Since there's a lot of ships here, we're going to stop firing for a second and get a little bit more distance. Of course, Bismarck does have 11.9 secondaries if you spec it for a full secondary build, which I would assume on all German battleships at this point. So staying at 11.7 should keep you safe for the most part from secondary shells. However, main batteries still does hurt. Unfortunately, fortunately, that Bismarck did not hit TheSneakySnake. So at this point, most of our team has died, and most of their team has not. So TheSneakySnake's got a lot of carrying to do, and again, we launched some torpedoes. In terms of wrongdoings here, there's not much else he can do. He's got to kind of burn down as many targets as he can and as quickly as he can to somewhat save his team, but the team is just falling apart as of right now. So we're just trying to get as many fires down, and something a lot of people tend to make the mistake of is shooting a target. When you're shooting a target, and you have just previously launched torps. You want to be shooting HE at them to try and set the fire. Hopefully you get 2 fires and they burn their damage control, so that when the torpedoes get there, you are able to get a flooding, because flooding, a full duration flood does a lot more than 1 or 2 fires does, because they only last for a certain period of time, usually only 30, 40, sometimes 60 seconds maximum, whereas a flood will last a lot longer with those buffs already applied. Managed to get high caliber there and set a few more fires on the Montana, who is burning. So something else I want to say is, you've seen the constant barrage of HE shells, but you have noticed, I hope you have noticed, that TheSneakySnake does switch during the appropriate times from AP to HE. He constantly is switching, and that is something you do want to incorporate into your gameplay, whether you are in a destroyer, which it's most prevalent in, or a cruiser, which has a slightly longer reload, but can still do that very effectively. As soon as you start seeing someone turn a little bit broadside, you should start considering switching. So unfortunately, there's not much you can do here. We've gotten high caliber Wither or Confederate this far, and unfortunately the team is just falling apart at this point. It's only a matter of time before the game ends. But again, this is what the Tier 10 Russian destroyers are good at, whether you play the more tanky line in the Khabarovsk, or you take the more AA-oriented support vessels in the Grozovoy. They are still in their original forms. They are still gunboats. It just depends on how you play them. Some play slightly different, and we have seen the Grozovoy is still a very potent gunboat, especially considering that it does have slightly less DPM than something like a Khabarovsk. It's got a slower reload. It also has a much lack of it has a a lot less guns. It's got 2 less guns on the ship than a Khabarovsk does, so this is part of the reason why you can a Khabarovsk can out DPM you if you are 1v1ing it. The other thing too is the alpha damage. I believe it's only 1800, where on the rest of the Russians it's 1900 damage for your HE shell. So that is another thing that you have to worry about, is the fact that you have to worry about less damage per salvo compared to all the other destroyers at your same tier in these Soviet boats. This boat is somewhat maneuverable. You can see the somewhat quick reaction time and a bit of a glide there as well. Again, it's not as maneuverable as something like a gearing or a Shimakaze. The gearing you're a little bit fatter, and you can kind of make your way around most things, but sometimes the fatness does mess with you a little bit. You see there, Fletcher was spotted. He kind of played it bad. Sneaky played it very well. He knew he had to go into the cap, and he knew he had to contest the cap as soon as possible, and that is just one way to do that. The Russian destroyers, again, at their core, are fast gunboats that are able to out-DPM their opponents for the most part. The only thing that you want to be careful of when you are charging caps like this is you have to look at your surroundings. Sneaky was very well aware that he had that Fletcher had very little support. You can see the closest ship to him was at about 14-15 kilometers, so there's no way that that Fletcher was going to get out alive. And if he was on, let's say, more health, like maybe full health, maybe that Fletcher was on full health, I would suggest TheSneakySnake, and I bet he would actually be going and starting to kite away, rather than just kind of charge him still. One thing I do want to mention, though, is I think, in my opinion, it's a little bit pointless to use your smoke there. There's no one that's going to be spotting you. It is kind of it is kind of useless waste. But at this point, I guess it doesn't really matter when you only have 2 ships against, what is that, 6? So we're seeing some good AP usage here, and even on cruisers that are somewhat angled and somewhat far away, you can still do some work and do some very nice AP damage. At this point, as soon as I go to look at the ammo selector, he's already got it switched. He's already got it loaded to AP. As soon as you see a ship go broadside, whether it's a battleship, whether it's a cruiser, you just switch to AP and watch the damage roll in. Pops his defensive fire there. I'm curious as to whether he has manual AA. If you don't have manual AA on the Griddle Savoy, it's a very good investment, especially with the defensive fire. You can get some very nasty AA, especially for tier 10. You can shoot down quite a few planes if you know how to maneuver and how to kite planes. Luckily for TheSneakySnake, he doesn't have a carrier in the match, so doesn't have to worry about that as much. But again, he's still doing a great job. This is what Russian destroyers are good at in their prime. They are just kiting boats, and if they're not kiting, then they are pushing a flank. In this situation, Sneaky was forced to kite, and he's doing a hell of a job of that. Again, even at this point, he could still be torpedoing these guys. He does have the concealment advantage. There's 1 destroyer left, and presumably he has very low health left. So, of course, you have to be careful of that. But yes, one thing I do want to also point out here is oh boy. So that Shima just took some torpedoes. One thing I do want to mention here is Sneaky did shoot torpedoes behind, in front of that Shimakaze, and by the looks of it, he did end up getting that Shima killed. Although that Shimakaze could have figured out that the torpedoes were coming, he did see them quite early. They were spotted quite early, so that is something to take note of. When you are shooting torpedoes, you do have to be careful of your surroundings, because if you shoot them behind a friendly or something, you are definitely responsible for your torpedoes, whether they hit the person or not. Neptune did a nice dodge there, and of course we are going to see TheSneakySnake dodge or switch to AP as soon as this Neptune goes a little bit more broadside. Neptune has no clue where he is, and he's keeping a good 500 meters detectability difference between him. Unfortunately, the Neptune does know how to angle, so he immediately switches back to HE, the more reliable damage source. But unfortunately, everyone's closed in on him at this point, and a Neptune at this range is just going to obliterate you no matter what ship you're in. The only ship that would possibly be a battleship, but certainly for a destroyer, doesn't matter what destroyer you pick, you are still going to die. The one thing, before he dies, he is angling at the most target. He's angling against the most amount of targets possible. But anyways, let's move on to the screenshot. Alright, so looking at the screenshots, that was a very good game. 572,000 credits. Arsonist, Confederate, Kraken, Witherer, and High Caliber. 241k damage. Only 1 torpedo hit on that Shimakaze, but it was a very good torpedo hit. It took a lot of HP from that Shimakaze. And of course we saw some 5 kills. We got a lot of AP usage out of our AP, and we managed to get a Citadel on that one Otago. 1781 base XP, 200 less than the approximately 200 less, closer to 150 than the top earner on the enemy team. So they had to, Sneaky had to have done very well, as you can see by the damage numbers and the base XP. Damage distribution. Main battery, 141,000 total, 519 shell hits. We've just been constantly raining down hell on enemy battleships, cruisers, and even destroyers. So that is, again, something you want to be making sure you're doing in a Russian destroyer. 13,000 for that one torpid, and then fires and flooding accounted for 86k. Looking at potential damage, looking at that kiting capabilities of these Russian destroyers, 3.5 million potential damage. These are high tier tier 10 battleship numbers in terms of potential damage. So everyone was shooting at him all the time, and he was able to dodge 3.5 million damage worth, which is again insane. And who said Russian destroyers can't spot? He did 50k spotting damage as well. Detailed report, not too bad, 288,000 credits. Walk away with, and some XP, which is always nice. It is a T10, so it doesn't matter as much. Alright, so now we're going to move on to some honorable mentions. I did promise this at the beginning of the video. The one that stuck out the most to me in terms of overall performance and just an absolutely god-tier game was this game in the Des Moines by a EU player, Subsidiarity. It was it was a very good replay. I did watch it, and it was very enjoyable. Unfortunately, I was not able to record that, so I do apologize to you, Subsidiarity. But this is just a monster game overall. 235k Confederate Devastating Strike Kraken. What is that? It's something. It's just a flash wound. There we go. First Blood and High Caliber. I know you guys didn't get to see it, and it doesn't do this replay justice, but 17 Citadels, you know that's an amazing game. And when you shoot down 47 Hakuryu planes, you're doing something right as well. Solo base cap and assisted solo base cap as well. Base XP, yeah, this is where it gets crazy. 4376. So if the damage numbers and the ribbons didn't tell you enough about this replay, this base XP tells the whole story. This is where plane kills come into account in terms of XP. When you can get a lot of plane kills, you can utterly destroy the base XP charts. And as you can see, Subsidiarity did just that. And he did end up winning this game, so that all just compounded. And with 6 kills to add to that 230k damage. Oh my, oh my. This was certainly a game. Unfortunately, we did not get to see it here, so again, apologize for that. Data report, 186k from main batteries, 100k from AP, 85 from the HE. Secondaries, lol. Close to a wither though, 48k. Potential damage, 671,000. It looks like German, so I cannot obviously understand any of this, but either way, some pretty impressive damage numbers here. And then some credits, very nice credits to be earned. Even though this is T10, we are still looking at near 600k credits and 32k Commander XP. I hope you guys enjoyed this this match analysis. Again, I do apologize for the lack of community replay this week, but I hope you guys enjoyed this match analysis of TheSneakySnake himself. He wanted me to do this and kind of critique what I could. There wasn't much, but in any case, I did my best. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.